Hello friends, welcome to the Edupedia world. In our previous tutorial, we have learned polymorphism in Java. In this tutorial, we'll continue the same by doing some of the live examples in our Eclipse IDE. So let's open our Eclipse IDE and let's try out some examples of polymorphism. Hi guys, so let's create a class. I'm going to right click, go to new, go to class. Over here, just give the name of your class. I'm giving the name as polymorphism example. So just to shorten it out, I'm writing polym example and I'm including the main method. Fine, so this is my public class. Let me also create some of the more class over here itself. So let me create another class. The name I'm giving is base. Fine. Then let me create another class called derived. Fine. So the class base and derived are two classes, and your derived class basically inherits the base class. So let me do extends base. Fine, so I think we are good with that. Now let's create something that we can actually inherit. Okay, so since we are doing an example of method overloading and overriding, let's create a method. So I'm going to create void meth. Okay, and over here I'm going to print out base method. Fine, and then over here I'm going to create this method void meth, and I'm going to print out derived method. So you see what we have done over here is we have done overriding. So okay, it's already defined, so I'm just going to name it as base class, and over here I'm going to name it as derived class. So you see we have done method overloading over here, and we are overriding a method meth, and since we are overriding, so we are changing the definition of it. So according to the rules of overriding a method, the method signature should be exactly same. So it should be exactly same. You cannot change it. If I'm going to change it, it becomes overriding. So if I'm going to do this int or something, etc., so this won't be overriding. It will become overloading. Whereas currently we are doing to override this method. So let's keep it as it is. Now another rule of overriding says like the return type can be anything. If it's like int, then it can be either int or any superclass of that. So now let me return something. Okay, let me try to return base class. Okay, and now I give the return statement. Okay, let me return null as of now. Fine. So over here, see it's saying change the return type of meth to base class. So I have to like keep the same return type over here since I'm overriding the method. Fine. Now if I try to do it like instead of base class, if I try to do it derived class, although it's not giving me an error, but then it is not method overriding. So we can just check that out. Let's call it out. Okay, I'm creating a object. So you can see I'm creating a derived class object, but I'm using a base class reference over here to create that. Fine, now let me see if I'm able to call meth over here. Yeah, I'm able to call meth over here. Fine. So now let's just run this code. So you see derived method got printed. So basically This one is actually what has been called derived method. Fine. Now let me just try to do this. Okay, so basically over here you can see I'm whatever it's returning, I'm taking it in base class B. So again it's going to take derived a method. Okay, so it's absolutely fine since we are actually storing a derived object, since it's returning a derived class and we are storing it in a base class, so it's fine. Okay, now let's change something out and let's cast it to base class and see what happens. So if we are going to do this, you see that then also the derived method gets called. Why so? Because the object that we have created is of derived class. Now let's change it to base class. Fine. So as of now, we are simply calling a base class method and we are storing in a base class object B, whatever the value is getting returned. So it's fine. Now let's try to change it to derived class. Fine. So here I'm changing the class to derived class. So whatever I'm getting, I'm just storing it in derived class. And you see it's already giving me a compile time error. It's saying cannot convert base class to derived class. So definitely base class object. So if it's returning a base class object, in this case, although it's returning null, but it can return a base class object. So it cannot store a base class object in your derived class. Fine. So that's the rule. I hope so that we are good with this. So this is called method overloading, and yeah, you can return the subtype. So derived class is actually the subtype of base class, so we can return that as well. Okay. I'm just changing it as of now. So now you can see what I have done is, like in my base class, I am returning a derived class object. Fine. And in my derived class, I'm basically returning a base class object. So this is giving me an error because according to the rule, if there is a method overriding, then either it should have a same return type or a return type that is a subclass. So over here, base class is actually not a subclass of derived class, rather it's a superclass. So this won't work. Whereas if I do it otherwise, it will work because in this case, derived class is actually a subclass of base class. So this is fine. Okay. And yeah, since we have done this, now let's see some of the more examples. And so one thing is, can we have static method? So if I just create this method as static, okay, oh, I need to just put it over here before the return type. And this is fine now. This is also fine now. So over here I have created two static method, and let's just change it back to the derived. Now if I just try to run it, it's giving me base method. Why so? Instead it should have given us derived class because I'm creating an object of derived class, but it's calling base method because static methods are actually tied down to the object at compile time, and it's always tied down to the reference type, and the reference type over here is the base class. So that's why it got tied down to the base class. So I hope so that's clear. Okay guys, now I would also like to take up some of the examples from a very famous book, Katie Sera. So this is really a good book of Java, and like although it's a big book, but I think you can always try out some example from it. So I'm just going to take up some of the examples from this and let's see if we are able to crack it or not. So here is the question. So it's given like public abstract interface Probenicate, and it's saying something like public void twiddle, and there's string s in the method. Now we have to choose which one of these is correct. So it's saying choose all that apply. So let's, instead of guessing it, let's simply try it out. Okay, so I'm just going to go over here and just removing all this as of now, and moving this to fine. And since it's using this interface, okay, so the error was saying that it should not be public because a class can have even just a single public class. So although we are having the public class polyam example, so I cannot have another class interface or abstract class that is public. So that's why the error was coming. Now it's gone. So it's saying which one is correct. So let's try the first one out firstly. Okay, so you can see we are having an interface probenicate, and then we are having an abstract class prob that implements probenicate. And in this abstract class, we are having public abstract void twiddle string s. Okay, so it's giving us compile time error, and what's the reason for that? It says implement the twiddle method, or you can it's not abstract. So why is it? Because over here you can see we are having public void twiddle, and it is taking string as an input, and then we created another abstract class that is implementing a interface. And although it's having the body of the method, but you can see it's also declaring the method as abstract. So you can do either one of the thing. Either you don't create the body or you don't put the method as abstract. So if I just remove abstract, it will work fine. Okay, or what I can do is I can just remove the body from it. So this is also fine. So this is fine. First was wrong. Just come to the second one. So what this doing is simply doing public abstract class prob implements propagate. So I think this should be fine. Okay. So yeah, you see it's fine because again it's an abstract class. So abstract class, it's okay for abstract class not to implement the method. Coming to the third one. So you see over here we are having a method and it is extending. So you see how a class cannot extend the interface, it can always implement. So let's correct this out. Implements. So if I'm going to do implements, then what will happen is I need to actually override this method. But over here this method is not overrided, rather it's overloaded. Why so? Because we are using integer I, not string s. So in order to override it, the signature should be exactly same. So if I do this, then it is fine. Okay. Let us try two more. Okay. So let's see what we have got over here. Okay. So this is a class and it's a prop class, and then it's implementing Subnocate. Fine. Again, the same thing is happening. Since it's implementing it, we need to put string over here, rather integer. That will work fine. I hope so you got why we need to put string over here, because we need to override it, not overload it. Whenever you implement the interface, you need to override the methods. Okay, let's go with the last one. Okay, here you see it's looking absolutely fine. Why so? Because the class prop that is implementing Fibonacci, and it's also overriding the method. Although it's having another twiddle method which is taking another integer, but it's also overriding. So that is something that will work for us. So since it's overriding the twiddle method, so it's fine. And it is also overloading the twiddle method, so that is also fine with us. So you can see the example of overriding and overloading here as well. This is called overriding, where we are having the exact same signature and we can just provide a different definition. and here it is overloading where we are changing the parameters. Okay. So well, this was the example of overriding and overloading. So let's do another example particularly of overloading. Okay. Now let me again create a class known as A. Again I'm creating a class B, and this class A actually extends this A class. Okay, now let's create a method. I'm having a method void add, and it's taking integer I, comma, integer j. Fine. And what it's doing is it's return something from this method. In order to do that, I need to change the return type. So let me make it int, and let me do return I plus j. Fine. And now, since this method is returning, let's create another method in this class which is returning a string, and the name of the method is also add. It is taking up string A, comma string B, and what it's returning us is return A plus B. Fine. So I hope so that this looks okay. So you can see over here we are having the method overloading. Since the method that we are overloading is called add, and we are having different return type of the method. Over here the return type is int, and over here the return type is string. It's taking the input as two integers, and this is taking the input as two strings. It's returning the sum of two integers. It's returning the concatenation of two strings. Similarly, you can have another method which will return you the float, and it will take a float value. So let's do that. Float and float f float h, and let's return f plus h. Fine. Now let's call these methods. Okay, so you can see we are having three methods. These are overloaded method. The name of the method is add, and it's having different return time and different parameters. So since the number of in the the thing that is must for an overloading is the signature or the number of parameters should change, and since the signature is changing, it actually doesn't include return type. So even if the return type is same, it doesn't matter, but the signature change should be there. Fine. Now let us create an object of this class. Okay, and let me also create object of B class. Okay. Now let's call the add method. Let me call a dot add. Let me pass 1, 2. So this looks fine since we are passing integer, and class A is having a overloaded method which can take integer. Now let me try to do another thing where I'm again going to call add, and I'm going to actually pass this. So you see over here this is giving us an error because class A is only having something that can add integers. It's not having anything which can add float. Now let's do the same thing over here. Fine. So you can see in B we are going to pass the float. So it's giving an error. Just let me check about this error. Okay. Add string type B is not applicable to double. Okay, so it's saying it cannot be used in double because basically we are passing the double value. So let me change exactly to float. So to make it a float value, if we just do this should work fine. Now these are the float values since we have attached f with it. And now let me just call another thing which is b add, and I'm passing 6, 7. So I'm basically passing integers over here, and let me do another add, and I'm passing a over here, and I'm passing h over here. Okay, Now let me just write some statement inside it so that you get to know like which method is getting called. So I write add 1 or add 1. Fine. In this I'm going to just write add 2 because this is the second method and this is the third method for the float. Now let's run our program. So you see, firstly add 1 got called because we were actually doing this add a from the A object and it's saying add 1, so that's fine. Then add 3 got printed. So over here you can see we are doing float addition. So for the float addition, this overloaded method will get called. Then we are doing a integer addition by passing 6 and 7. So you can see although like this method that is taking the input of integer defined in class A, but since B is extending A, so it can be called by the object of B. Then we are having add 2. So add 2 is getting called because we are basically adding to or concatenating two strings. That's the reason for calling add 2. So I hope so overloading is clear. Now let's try something else also. Let me pass let me just change it to double instead of float. Okay, fine. And let me just keep the calling as it is. So you can see over here I'm still passing float. Now if I just run it, it will again call this method. Why so? Because a double can intake a float value. So it won't call int1 because integer cannot take a float value, integer is smaller, but a double can take a float value. So that's why it will call this thing. Okay. So I hope so that we are good with the overloading and overriding. Now also let's try one more example of overloading from Tethysera book. This one, I think this looks good to me. Let's try this one. So I'm just removing these classes, whatever I've created, and I'm going to just trace out this code over here so that it would be easy for you to understand. You can see we are having a class X and it is having a method void do1. Fine. Then we are having a class Y which is extending the class X and it is having another method which is do2. So up till now there is no overriding or overloading. Fine. And after that there's a main method. So let me just define whatever written in main in my actual main method. So let me just go up and define it over here. Fine. And let me take this also upward. Yeah, I think now we are good with it. So up till now we have seen that there's a class X and there's a class Y that is extending X, and X is having a method do1 and Y is having a method do2. Since it's a public method, so for Y the method do2 is its own method is accessible and method do1 is also accessible to the class Y. And now in the main we are actually creating an object x1, fine, and then we are creating object x2, which is we have created using a object using a reference of x, but the object created is of y, and then we are having a simple object of y1 that is the object of y. Now we have to insert a code so that we are able to call these methods. So let's see the option we have. So it's saying x2 dot do2. Do you think that this will compile if I'm just going to do x2 dot do2? Well, x2 is the object of we can say y, right? So if I'm going to do this won't compile. Why so? because whenever you just create a object using a reference of the base class and the object created is of the derived class, then the method that you are calling from that object should be defined in both base and derived class. So do2 is already, although it's defined in the class y, but it's not defined in the class x. So that's why it will have a problem calling it, because actually it doesn't know which one to call. It will only get to know at the runtime, but at the compile time it will give us an error. So in order to rectify that error, what we can do is like we can place do2 over here and the error will be gone. But since this was not the option, so I'm just going to remove it. And yeah, so this is a thing that will give us compile time error. We can't do this. Now let me try another thing. So over here, what we are doing is we are again calling the do2 method using an x2 object, but then we are basically casting it to the y class. So although y class has do2 method, but again this won't work. Okay guys, so I'm just removing it again just to come back to the original code, and let's try the third one. So in this the casting is done properly. So the error that we were getting previously was due to the cast. So the casting is proper. So over here you can see, like, first of all we have casted x2 to y. Now our x2 has become completely the object of y when the reference has changed, and then we are calling do2. So this is fine because we have actually changed the x2 object completely to y, and y2 has do2. So here the casting is done properly. That's why it's not giving us an error which is given us in previous option. Okay, so you can see the C statement is correct. Fine. So okay guys, I hope so that you have enjoyed running, overriding and overloading, and let's meet in the next tutorial. Okay guys, so thank you very much. I hope to see you again in the next tutorial.